Let's get ready to mortgage. He is the prince of programs, guru of guidelines, master of matrices. He puts the fun in funding. Please welcome Mark, Mr. Mortgage, Eitel.
All right. My name is Mark Eitel, and you are listening to the Mr. Mortgage Show. And guys, we do this each week, same time, same station. Super excited to have you with us. We have a great show lined up for you this week. We have a special guest in the studio with me, and Dom, as always, my producer, is manning the Anytime Hotline. If you have questions, that is always my favorite part of the show. You can call or text your questions to the Anytime Hotline. And that number is 855-462-7292. Write it down somewhere important on your hand, on your forehead, on your wife's forearm, wherever you need to write it down. 855-462-7292. You can call or text your questions to that number anytime during the show, and that pushes to my office during the week when we are not on the air. So that's a useful number to have around, and you can always email your questions to the Mr. Mortgage Show by visiting mr.mortgage, never a .com, just type in mr.mortgage, hit enter, the website will pop up. On the upper right-hand corner is the Contact Us box. You can type your questions in there, and Dom will read them on the air. And if you're courageous and you want to be on the air with us, well, just call that number, and he'll get you on the air. But as always, we start the week off with the news of the week. Hey, before I do that, let me introduce you to our guest, and he's going to participate this week with me. In the studio, I have Jacob Webb, who is the CEO and founder of Level 10 Title, and he's been in the business almost as long as me, probably as long as me, and I always appreciate his insight. Hey, Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, super excited to have you. I tell the listeners all the time that, you know, a busy real estate agent is a good source of information, but the busiest agents I know might see 30 transactions a year.
Right. Yep.
A busy mortgage guy might see 30 transactions a month, but a busy title guy or a busy appraiser could see 30 transactions in a week.
Yep. Yeah. No, I was just thinking about numbers a couple of days ago, and we're talking about, hundreds of transactions just in this year.
Yeah.
Which actually, when I think about the things I deal with on a daily basis, the most common thing I deal with right now is just questions. I get a lot of questions from a lot of different people.
Well, I'm going to lean on you during this week's show because you and my appraiser buddies are the ones that are on the front line. I feel like you've got the best data. So when we talk about price trends or contract trends or, which direction the market's moving in, I really feel like you guys see it first and then us, and it might trickle on back down to the agent. So I really feel that you've got some super valuable insight, and I appreciate you being with us this week.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's going to be fun. But hey, let's dive into a little bit of the news. As always, I like to poke fun at CNBC. Little Miss Red Riding Hood, Diana Olick, who, guys, I love to tease her, but she's one of my favorites. She's been around for a long time. She does a heck of a job, but she's definitely drawn the short straw and seems to really have to poke fun at the real estate market lately. But she was on the air this week talking about demand for new homes has fallen another click downward. We're now 18% down year over year. And on the surface, that sounded super, super scary. And we talked about it in the last couple of shows, how builder sentiment is down and they're projecting fewer new construction starts next year. But in that article, if you read through it, she talks about new home prices are up almost 14% year over year. So we're in a very interesting dichotomy of market trends right now. We're seeing sales volume pull back. We're seeing year-over-year appreciation numbers cooling, but still moving upward. And here's one more example of how the headline can scare the heck out of you. But if you read the data behind it, there's still some support for real estate at these prices. So I found that pretty interesting. Another thing that was really called out in that article was mortgage demand has fallen 40% year over year. And I don't think that's any surprise. I mean, ask any mortgage broker out there now. He's got a heck of a lot of time to play golf, but it's interesting. They go on to say that 86% decline in refi volume, which I wasn't surprised at that. One thing that blew my mind, though, they were really beating this number over the drum, that less than 150,000 American households could benefit from a refinance. Now, that was their term. And by that, I think they mean a rate and term refinance, which is purely the refinance that lowers your monthly payment. We talk about debt consolidation refis a lot on this show because that's a positive move regardless of interest rate, because in that arena, you're looking at just your monthly outflow. So if you can reduce your monthly outflow by consolidating some debt, it may make sense. And I know there's far more than 150,000 households that can benefit from that because, my God, consumer debt is flying. And we talk about it a lot on this show, guys. If you have questions around it, just give us a call, and Jacob and I will dive deep on it. The Federal Reserve raising the overnight rate is not what's directly impacting mortgage rates. It's the mortgage-backed securities market and the lack of liquidity and buying demand on the mortgage-backed security market that's causing rates to go up. But I'm not going down that bunny trail at the moment. What I wanted to share is what the Federal Reserve is directly impacting is your daily life. So credit card rates have jumped up 234 basis points from the beginning of the year, with averages now nearly 20%. And if you think about that, guys who are carrying a lot of credit card balance, man, you're paying almost 20% on average. That means that there are people with good credit paying less, but a lot of people paying more. That's a big number to swallow. HELOCs, home equity lines of credit, are up now, averaging in the 7s. And I'm seeing rates get quoted even higher than that. We have a lot of people calling saying, wait a minute, I thought HELOCs were cheap and I'm getting this rate quote online. And then lastly, you guys know it, we're not going to beat this over the head too much, but mortgage interest rates are up to nearly 7% right now, depending on what your credit score is or what your loan program is. And then auto loans, surprisingly, are still lagging. They're only up 162 basis points to a number, I have it here, at 5 or 6 and change. So I was surprised to see that the auto loan interest rates were that far behind the curve, but they're definitely moving up too. And then personal loans are nearly 12%. So all that being said, 7% interest rate on mortgages starts to sound pretty cheap. Jacob, are you seeing about the same things with the interest rates on the mortgages that you're closing? Are you those trends are kind of supporting?
Yeah, no, those numbers line up for sure. I mean, that's the those rates and those percentages you're talking about are what I'm seeing come across the table on a regular basis now.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I talked to an agent the other day and she said, hey, we closed a transaction last week and the rate was in the 6s. Why are you saying they're in the 7s? And a lot of time, guys, you've bought that interest rate 30 or 45 days ago because your mortgage broker or your banker locked that interest rate on the activity back in July or August, and now that you close that transaction, sure, you look like a hero, but that's not today's rate. So don't let that wrap you around the axle, because we're always giving you the very, very latest data. And I'm sharing all of that only to encourage you that maybe a home equity line of credit to reduce some of that credit card debt, or the rec refi that we talk about all the time, might still be in vogue. Don't get yourself hung up because suddenly you're no longer the hero of the barbecue with the 3% interest rate. Because, you know, in my younger years, I used to work out a lot, and I trained at Gold's Gym. And there was a guy, he shared something with me that was super impactful. I was a young man. I was trying to get big and buff, and I was in there working out. And I was doing strength training, and he said to me that, you know, being strong only impresses people in jail and in the gym. He said, you want definition and you want to look good, you have to do these other exercises. That's what the rest of the world sees. And I think that 2 or 3% interest rate is kind of like strength training. It's only cool if you're the guy with the 2% interest rate and you're bragging about it at the barbecue, because the reality is, man, you got to manage your own personal finances. And I don't care what the Smiths down the street have for their mortgage rate. I wouldn't let the rate detour me from buying or refining right now if the numbers made sense to me. And we talk about it all the time, guys, and we're going to dive into it in this week's show. If the budget number makes sense, that's the number you want to focus on. The interest rate doesn't matter. The budget determines how much you can borrow based on that interest rate, but the budget is what you're qualified on every single time. Whether it's a car, whether it's a home, focus on that budget number, because, guys, rent right now is still crazy and it's climbing, and owning a home is probably your only bet to fight against that. So anyway, you hear the music. You know what that means? That's my cue. We'll be back in 2. Dom is going to take us into this break, but on the other side, Jacob and I are going to answer your questions, and we are going to go on with more of the show. Hang in there. We'll be right back. It's not every day that you need an appraisal, whether it's for a divorce settlement, estate planning, or maybe you're appealing a tax assessment, or you just want to make sure you have adequate coverage in your property insurance. When you need a certified appraisal, turn to my friends at SOFLappraisal.com. That's SOFLappraisal.com. Peter and his team have been appraising properties here in South Florida for decades. SOFLappraisal.com. And tell them you heard this on the Mr. Mortgage Show.
Here's another 5-star review.
My wife and I own a small business. And the way our accountant file our taxes, we don't show much income on tax returns. Because of this, it looks as if we don't make the money. This was a problem for our bank when we applied for a mortgage. But not for Mark. He verifies our income by using our monthly bank statements. Mark and his Mr. Mortgage team made a big difference for me. Yes, I am happy to recommend Mr. Mortgage Mark.
Hey, it's Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com. www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Are inflation and everyday expenses eating into your retirement income? Maybe you've considered a reverse mortgage and have unanswered questions like, do I still own my property? Can the bank kick me out? What happens when I die? Can I still leave my house to my kids? These are all great questions. Visit www.moreaboutreverse.com to learn more. That's www.moreaboutreverse.com. www.moreaboutreverse.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark Eitel, and you heard the man. 855-462-7292 is the Anytime Hotline, and you can call or text that number, and he always forgets to mention that. And like I said before, he's way too big to slap around. He looks just like his voice sounds, so I'm not doing it. I'm sending Dom in there to rough him up. But 855-462-7292 is the Anytime Hotline, and that's the way to get your questions on the air right now while Dom is manning that number. But hey, we were talking a little bit about, just the economy in general, where rates are, and how oftentimes that's not the most important number. However, that's the number that we all have a tendency to focus on. So if you missed that and you want to double back and start the show over again, the information's not going to change, but hopefully it'll sit a little better. You can visit MrMortgageRadio.com and you'll hear all the back episodes. And actually, too, while I'm thinking about it, because you heard me mention we've got Jacob Webb from Level 10 in the studio with us. I'm going to post all of his information as part of the show posting, too. So if you check out MrMortgageRadio.com, in the show notes, I'll list all of Jacob's contact info because he's going to be a valuable resource for us moving forward, guys. But anyway, let's throw the question mic over to Dom and see what he's got teed up and see what Jake and I can do for you question-wise today.
Sheila sent this one in. I'm looking at a lot that is currently landlocked. Can I buy just a small piece of the neighbor's property for a driveway to access the locked land?
Hey, Sheila, that is a fascinating question. So, and I've seen that happen quite often in neighborhoods that were partially developed and then abandoned, where there are parcels that are on streets yet to be cut. But here in our area, the completely landlocked parcel is a little bit more unique than that, but it's not uncommon for somebody to want to score a deal on a piece of property that might be underpriced because of accessibility. And this sounds like that could be an opportunity that you have, right? So it's interesting, and I'm going to let Jacob jump in on this answer. But my first thoughts with it, I would be concerned if the current owner of the neighboring parcel has a mortgage on it. That might pose a bit of difficulty. Because the lender has a lien on that parcel as it was purchased. And if you're devaluing it by carving a piece of it out for an easement, that may or may not be an issue. but it's a consideration. I'm sure it can be done at what level of difficulty. I'm not quite sure. Hey, what do you think, Jacob?
So it's a really good question, and it's not one that you see too often, but carving up the property is going to probably be the more difficult path to figuring that one out. I mean, you've got to get approvals from the county to split that property, and we're not even getting into whether or not there's a loan on the property and the values and things like that. I mean, it seems like the right way to do this. I've seen a couple of things. The easement is one path, right? To go through a process of getting an easement so you have access to get access to your property. There's also there can be some things that I've seen before where it's a simple agreement between the property owner to allow you access and to whether it's to build a driveway or some of the ones I've seen, it's more of just like a dirt path, like where I can access my property.
Gotcha.
But it's really going to take some cooperation from the owner of that other property, which is probably why there's a potentially a deal there.
Yeah, suddenly that 15 or 18 or 25 foot easement became super, super valuable to that current owner because he realizes what's sitting on that back 40. He sees that parcel back there. Heck, he's probably been mowing it. Who knows? He might want to buy it. If it was me, I'd want to buy it. But that's a great question. You know what I'd like to do, Sheila, if you're open to it? Give us a call during the week, 855-462-7292, and I can get you in touch with a real estate attorney who shares an office in the same building that I'm in, and he might be able to have a little more insight. But it sounds encouraging enough to explore because Jacob's seen, a similar situation, and it's interesting. And I know that and I don't know what the statute is, but there's a rule or a law that if you've maintained that easement for a number of years, by default, it now becomes an easement. I don't know if maybe something like that could play into your favor. But brilliant question. It's rare that we have one that doesn't have a very easy answer to it.
No, that's a great question. And the real estate attorney is the way to go on that one because you've also got to consider what happens to the easement if the property's sold.
Right.
Or the agreement, if the property's sold, does it pass?
Yeah, that would be my concern because if you're going to invest in this dirt and presumably build on it, whatever legal path you took to establish that access, you're going to want to make sure that is now yours and that it conveys with future owners of your property as well, because that's going to be a pivotal part. Say that 3 times, pivotal part. But anyway, that was a great question, Sheila. Let me throw it over to Dom to see if we have another one.
We do. Brigitte sent a text. I just want to publicly thank Mark and his whole team. I didn't think we had a chance, but they got us a great loan. We are now happy first-time homeowners. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, I appreciate that. And I did not pay Dom to read that question. You guys were awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity and trusting us with your scenario. And just to let everybody know, their bank had told them no. They were hung up on a guideline that was just misinterpreted. Great borrowers, great employment, not a challenge. I guess that's the advantage of having a well-earned bald spot. My team and I have been doing this for a long time, so we were able to get a great loan product for them, and I'm super, super excited to learn that you were happy with everything. And guys, if you need us, we're here. So congratulations on that. But enough self-aggrandizing. Let me throw it over to Dom for another question.
Calvin sent this one. We bought a lot a couple years ago, and we want to build next year. Will we be able to finance 100% of the construction costs?
Hey, another great question. Another person looking at dirt, or in this case, has some dirt and wants to build. So here's how a construction loan works. We talk about it a little bit, not a lot, but we talk about it a little bit. You mentioned in your question you've owned it for a couple years, and that's an interesting part of the question because if you've purchased the dirt and you own it free and clear, but you've owned it less than 12 months, then that purchase price becomes your equity position in the deal. But now that you've owned it for more than 12 months, the appraised value becomes your equity position. So almost always you have enough equity to borrow 100% of the construction. And just in case anyone out there is scratching their head and is curious how this works, when you get a construction loan, it's released in draws as your builder completes certain stages. That loan will grow, right? Because you have basically a credit line that's established to build the house with. And at each draw, you owe more money. Well, there's interest due on that. oftentimes in the construction loan, we can set up the interest reserve as part of the loan, so you're not paying along the way. And then upon CO, that converts to a fixed rate, or I'm assuming, but that converts to a mortgage. If you chose a fixed rate mortgage, it would convert to a 30-year fixed rate, say as an example, and then you start making your mortgage payments. But yeah, that sounds super doable, 100%, especially if you've owned it for more than a couple years. Hey, Jacob, are you seeing much activity in the construction perm world as far as your closings?
I have not. Not recently. I have a feeling that this may come back around as an option for people, but usually I'm on the backside of it when it's already done and built.
Gotcha.
And, but it's definitely a good option. But I agree with you. The purchase of the land itself is essentially the equity position there. So.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're having this conversation because I had one yesterday before I left the office. And guys, if you don't think opportunities are out there in real estate, you're just not looking hard enough, because a woman called me yesterday and she's looking at a property in Port St. Lucie and the house needs to be torn down, but they can pick the lot up for $90,000. So it's fascinating to me that there's a house with a roof and an AC unit and a kitchen for $90,000. Now, granted, it's a tear down, but my point in that story is the lots are selling for $150,000. So they're going to buy this property and tear the house down, and they're going to I'm guessing, I don't know, $15,000-$20,000 in the demo costs. So they're going to own that property for probably $30,000 or $40,000 less than if they just went out there and bought raw land. And guys, sometimes there's an advantage to doing that. You can leave just enough of the existing structure to avoid the impact fees of a new build. And sometimes that's $15,000-$20,000 in savings. So there is a strategy around buying a teardown that may make sense. But yeah, there is definitely opportunity out there. And guys, that's why we do the show, for your questions and just to kind of get everyone to exhale for a minute, throw the headlines off to the side, and have real meaningful discussions about strategies that allow you to make moves in real estate. So anyway, I'm rambling. You hear the music. That is Dom's cue to tell me we need to take a 2-minute break. Sit tight for 2 minutes. On the other side of this break, there'll be more of the show.
Are inflation and everyday expenses eating into your retirement income? Maybe you've considered a reverse mortgage and have unanswered questions like, do I still own my property? Can the bank kick me out? What happens when I die? Can I still leave my house to my kids? These are all great questions. Visit www.moreaboutreverse.com to learn more. That's www.moreaboutreverse.com. www.moreaboutreverse.com.
Here's another 5-star review.
We started our loan with a different company. They said we were approved, but at the last minute they told us there was a problem. I still don't know what went wrong, but thankfully our real estate agent told us about Mark. I was pretty stressed, but it's the perfect house, so we gave Mark a shot. He got it done. I'm not sure what was different, but I don't really care. We even got a better interest rate and with less money out of pocket than the first guy quoted us. It was a great surprise. Yes, I'm happy to recommend Mark and his Mr. Mortgage team.
Hey, it's Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com. www.reallyGreatAgents.com. It's not every day that you need an appraisal, whether it's for a divorce settlement, estate planning, or maybe you're appealing a tax assessment, or you just want to make sure you have adequate coverage in your property insurance. When you need a certified appraisal, turn to my friends at SOFLappraisal.com. That's SOFLappraisal.com. Peter and his team have been appraising properties here in South Florida for decades. SOFLappraisal.com. And tell them you heard this on the Mr. Mortgage Show.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark Eitel, and you are listening to the Mr. Mortgage Show. And I got to chuckle because I'm loving having Jacob in the studio with me because he is one of the guys that I actually enjoy geeking out with on all of the real estate data and strategies. And we just almost missed coming back from that break because we were talking amongst ourselves about what we're seeing in the way to work out some deals. And Dom was over there doing the YMCA, moves, getting us back settled in behind the mic. So, hey, I want to pick that conversation up just
sure.
where we left it off with, Jake sitting right next to me. We're doing this in the studio, and he kind of bumped me on the leg and said, there's still opportunity out there, and he's seeing it. Sure. Let's just touch on that for a minute.
So the one thing that I'm seeing is as things started to shift, it seemed like a lot of fear entered the market, and people are listening and getting information from maybe sources that are creating sort of a fear-based mentality. But what I've learned is that there's always opportunity.
Yeah.
It's just about maybe thinking about how you want to structure it.
Right.
Possibly having dialogues with people on different opportunities that may be out there as the market shifts. And so there are people that are out there that have never owned a home.
Right.
If they look at it the right way and they shift sort of their thought process on how they do it, where they might be able to get into an opportunity to get the ball rolling for them, where they might not otherwise think they would have that opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. And that's why we do this. And that's why I'm tickled that you're sitting here with me, because I really think that we've got to look at everything through the lens of optimism and opportunity, because the news is just scaring the hell out of us.
That's right.
And I'm going to share something real quick. This blew my mind, and I just learned this earlier in the year, but this really kind of drives the point home how having only part of the information can fuel a bad decision and can reinforce a bunch of people making a bad decision.
That's
and
right.
Where I'm going with that is the headlines, guys. That's half the story. Yeah. So we've all heard that saying, jack of all trades, master of none.
Right.
You've heard that, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
So, I'll give a perfect example. I run and own my title company, and then I had an opportunity to open up another business that was almost like a spinoff. And when I really sat down and just took a look at it, I realized I could do both of these and really probably just do an okay job with both of these, or I can just stay focused on what I'm at and what I'm doing and become great at that.
Right. And you guys are great at that. I really admire how you run your practice. But that's exactly where my mind has gone to that for 53 years.
Yeah.
But I heard the rest of the saying the other day. It's jack of all trades, master of none, oftentimes is better than master of one. And I thought, holy cow, we've grown up conditioned that phrase in and of itself means don't diversify your process, laser focus, that's the only way to succeed. Yeah. But here's a perfect example. By running your own company, you truly are a jack of all trades, because you can jump in and do, I'm guessing, all the jobs of your operation if you had to. Probably not at the same level of your staff that specialize in that, but you could probably...
Yeah. I definitely could do all the positions.
Right.
It's not my gifting areas, right? It's not the areas that I'm comfortable, but I can get through a closing package, right? I'm not wired for that,
right.
But staff gets sick, and people have family issues or things, and they need some time off, and you've still got to keep the ship moving forward.
Yeah,
so.
And I think that's what that saying was designed for. Was, okay, guys, be excellent at one thing, but there's also value in the rest of it also. And I think by just catching the headline, we don't know the whole picture. Yeah. We talked about that, and I really, I say this in jest. I joke about Diana Olick all the time at CNBC, but I truly think she's just drawn the short straw, and it's a negative spin on real estate news, and that happens to be her category.
If I can interject for 30 seconds. So my oldest son, who's up in New York in college, literally calls me a couple weeks ago, and I don't know how he got on to thinking about this, but he said, Dad, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to buy a house.
Right.
And this is a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And he said, I think I'm going to wind up having to come move back in with you guys. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Let's hold. But that's the mentality. And this is really what our children are picking up
Yeah.
as well. And so I told him, like, listen, we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Right.
But there are opportunities out there. We just have to take it one step at a time. And it really saddened me to hear my own son really think that he'll never be able to have that quote unquote American dream. Right. And
well, and that's such a valuable part of the American life is owning a home. And, it gets laughed at sometimes by the younger generation who thinks investing in Bitcoin is way sexier, which it is. I mean, awesome, right? But the reality of owning your home, it gives you so much life stability, more than just an address. And being in the business as long as I've been, I really see the benefit of that. You have someone like your son who's thinking, oh my God, I might not have a path to this. And then thank God, just about every aspect of this business like the back of your hand, and you're going to guide him into an opportunity. Well, then when he's 30, if he needs to do a cash out refi or an equity line because of an opportunity, he's going to be able to do it. Heck, we talked about it earlier in this show. We had a very young couple who purchased a home before COVID, big run up in equity. Well, she lost her job during COVID. The kids were no longer insured. He was a chef getting just minimal hours.
right.
And their kids wrecked the bicycle and put the teeth through the back of their mouth, and they needed emergency dental surgery. And I had no idea, $25,000.
Wow.
And they did a no interest Discover card to get that paid for. And, more power to them. They did what they had to. But long story short, all those 0 interest rate credit cards reset. And they called me scared. Like, what do we do? Well, we took a look at their situation, and rates were really, really low then. So they were able to pull the cash out, pay off all the credit cards, and lower their monthly payment. And my point in that story isn't to say run out there and refi. My point in that story is to say that, Jacob's son at some point is going to be an owner, and at some point a father, and raising a family. And that equity may help them. And then later in life, you sell that property and you move up or down or lateral move, but you're using the house's money. And then at the very end of life, if you outlive your savings account, that equity can be accessed via a reverse mortgage.
Yeah.
But the key component is exhale. Don't let the fear, rule you, and jump into the game. I mean, I was blessed at a very early age to be coached to buy a house. And I was 21, 22, had no idea what I was doing. But that decision that was heavily encouraged by somebody that was a mentor of mine gave me what I needed to make the next moves in life.
Right.
So
It would change your life.
No question.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think the average married couple, young married couple, both with very good jobs, say, making $50,000 a year each.
Right.
I think there's a fear that they're not going to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And I really think part of our role is to combat that fear and sort of try and help them see the other side of the narrative that we're seeing everywhere else.
And I think that's why there's so much synergy in how we both run our businesses, because, fundamentally so guys, in real estate, it becomes super sexy to want to be the luxury property listing agent. And they've got the Instagram post, and they got the Bentley in front of the big house on the water, which is awesome, right? They've achieved a level of success in their business. But the reality is all that started at one point with a first-time buyer.
That's right.
Because you have to think about your life in real estate as a line of dominoes across a table. And if that first-time buyer doesn't buy that property, he's never a move-up buyer. He's never a luxury buyer, and then he's never someone who sells, cashes out equity, and then settles into a more comfortable life at a later date. So I love the fact that we're having this conversation, because I think, and guys, you might be sitting at home, 70 years old and thinking, that's great, Mark. That's great, Jacob. I've owned real estate my whole life. This means nothing to me. Yeah, it does. There's somebody that looks up to you right now, either a grandson, a cousin, a nephew, the kid at the end of the street who stops to pet your dog when you walk them. These are the guys and gals in our lives that need this encouragement, and you can set somebody down the path to success by just giving them, hey, at very least, tell them to listen to the show. We'll answer their questions. But my point is, it doesn't have to be scary. Expectations may have to be lowered, but getting in the game at some point is required if you're going to play any type of equity position long term. So anyway, we're going to go so far and so deep into more of this on the other side of the break. We're going to keep taking your questions, but Dom is demanding that I stop talking and that we jump into a quick break. So we'll be back in 2 minutes with more of the show.
Here's another 5-star review.
As a realtor, I have a bunch of mortgage brokers to choose from, but I prefer to work with Mark and his Mr. Mortgage team. In this crazy market, there is no room for error, especially on the mortgage side. Mark's team moves fast, keeps everybody in the loop, and makes things happen. They always give my clients a great deal and take the time to walk them through every step of the process. When you're considering a lender, I encourage you to talk to Mark Eitel and the Mr. Mortgage team.
Hey, it's Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com. www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Are inflation and everyday expenses eating into your retirement income? Maybe you've considered a reverse mortgage and have unanswered questions like, do I still own my property? Can the bank kick me out? What happens when I die? Can I still leave my house to my kids? These are all great questions. Visit www.moreaboutreverse.com to learn more. That's www.moreaboutreverse.com. www.moreaboutreverse.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark Eitel, and you are still tuned in to the Mr. Mortgage Show, and we sure do appreciate you. We do this every week right here, same time, same station. I am joined, as always, by Dom, my producer, who is manning the Anytime Hotline, 855-462-7292. Call or text 855-462-7292. And my special guest, Jacob Webb. I'm really enjoying the conversation. We were deep diving in that break, so we're going to keep it rolling. But
yeah,
hey,
we should record the breaks. So, that might be a good way to go.
Dom's
here.
like, wow, the breaks would be a much better show. Yeah. You guys are so loose and chatty during the breaks. Yeah. But hey, let's throw it over to Dom for a few more questions, and then Jacob and I will deep dive some more philosophical thoughts on real estate.
Brandon wants to know, can I get a reverse mortgage on a manufactured home? I don't have a mortgage right now.
Hey, that's a great question and a very easy answer. Yes, sir, you can. Here's the caveat with manufactured homes. You have to also own the dirt, right? So sometimes the manufactured home is in a co-op neighborhood and you don't actually own the lot. You own a share of the co-op, which is tied to the lot. So just make sure that you own the home as real property and you're not paying lot rent and you're not in a co-op, then yes, the HECM loan or the reverse mortgage, as we often talk about, is definitely doable on a manufactured home. It's going to have to be 1977 or newer. And I know there's a stickler out there who's saying, no, Mark's wrong. It's the summer of 1976, which is true. But I don't know anybody who knows the month and year that anything was manufactured. So I just say, as a safe rule of thumb, make it 1977. But yes, technically it was June or July of 1976. But great question. And yes, you can definitely do a reverse mortgage. And Jacob and I were talking a lot about that during the break, about the necessity of getting in the game and then how the equity in your home can become that retirement asset.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the way that my wife and I have positioned ourselves, where our home really is the stabilized retirement piece,
right?
To like our portfolio. Like, I don't even know that I open up my 401k and like our little retirement plans. I don't even look at them because it's depressing.
Yeah, so, there are definitely days you don't want to open that user panel.
I feel very comfortable, and I don't know what the end game is going to be with the property. Maybe it's a reverse mortgage. Maybe it's we sell and downsize, and I guess it depends on how many of my kids are still living with me.
Right.
But But it's the mindset of using the real estate to kind of help you accomplish what that long-term goal is.
Right.
And you just got to get in.
No, I love that. I love that, because you and I think so much alike when it comes to that. And as I mentioned, a lot of our listeners are stable. They're already set up, but there are people in their lives who aren't. But guys, I mean, it's one or two unforeseen medical expenses or bad decisions, and then all of a sudden you're in need yourself. So I mean, we did a reverse mortgage earlier this year for probably the coolest couple that I met. I mean, these people are amazing. In the 2 hours that I spent in their home, I think 4 or 5 of the neighbors came over just to check on them and say hello and bring gifts and have a cocktail and shoot the breeze. These were super cool people. But he had an unforeseen medical issue, and he twisted his ankle and thought it was a twisted ankle. Well, he had torn something that tore a blood vessel. Long story short, his leg was amputated, and it was uninsured. And it was 2 helicopter trips to the emergency room. What do you call that? Trauma Hawk. And I mean, it ate up his retirement plan. And thankfully, he owned the home with a ton of equity, and they did a reverse mortgage. And one cool thing about the reverse mortgage a lot of people don't realize is if one person is over 62, that's all that's required. Your spouse can be younger than 62, and they're considered an eligible non-borrowing spouse. They can go on the reverse mortgage and receive the same protections that you do as the borrower, can live there until their death. And that was the case. They were trying to hold out until the wife was over the 62-year threshold, and she, it just became too burdensome. And we had a quick conversation, and they realized they didn't have to wait any longer. So we used that eligible non-borrowing spouse loophole, and they're living happily ever after. They're just super cool. And for that reason, I love sharing the story, because it's not for everybody, but for the right person, it can make a life-changing difference. And it's good to know that you have it if you need it, right?
I mean, there's safety and security there, right? You feel safe. And I know for me personally, I look at real estate as it's numbers, and it's a business.
Yeah.
I'm not super emotionally attached.
Right.
But I've been married for 20 years, and my wife having a home and a nest, that's important to her.
Yeah.
And so we've had the opportunity and been blessed in such a way that that home has become a part of our long-term game plan for how we're going to continue living our life.
Well, it's funny that you say, it's not funny. I really appreciate that you said that, because people look at a home as an investment, and those are the guys that are looking purely at interest rate. And then you have people that look at a home as, an opportunity to squirrel away a nest egg for the future. But the home is so much more than that. I mean, you raise your kids there, you celebrate the holidays, you come home after a crappy day, and there's some peace in just falling down in your own easy chair at your own home with your own family and your wife. And I just think that there's a whole generation of young people behind us that are they're being convinced by the headlines that that's not obtainable to them, or they have the vagabond mentality, the van life, the tiny house life, which is cool, guys. Don't get me wrong, super cool. I was going to do the backpack trip across Europe when I was a kid. I totally get that mentality, but at some point, there's more value in real estate than purely the math. There's an intrinsic value to it too, and I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's obviously a financial decision, but it's a mental, emotional type of thing. But which is why there's so many people that are mentally afraid, emotionally afraid of what can happen. Listen, I have 6 kids. Anytime I talk, it's hard not to talk about your kids,
right?
But I had 6 of them, and the majority of the ones that are growing and out of the home, they don't think that they don't think that can happen for them,
right?
And so what I like about really the message that we're sending, at least in this show, is that you may already be there, but your opportunity might be to pour that knowledge and encouragement into somebody else.
Yeah, and it's our duty to, right?
I agree.
It's our duty to. Yeah. I mean, I think the ultimate success in life, take the scorecards out of it. You can have the big house, the beautiful wife, the killer car. That's awesome, right? That's the scorecard that a lot of people have. But, you know, at my age, I look past all that. None of that's important to me anymore. At one point early in life, I aspired to be the fancy guy. But I think having the ability to reach behind you and pull somebody along with you or educate somebody on a path to a step up, or just as we're talking about, as corny as this sounds, guys, equity in real estate can make a huge difference in someone's life. And yeah, maybe the strategy, and Jacob and I were talking about this earlier, maybe the strategy is a longer play, right? It's going to take me 18 months to be mortgage ready, or 24 months, or maybe it's not the 3-bedroom, 2-bath with the pool. Maybe it's the 2-2 townhouse, kind of right on the border of the neighborhood I really like, but I really don't like it. But guys, I mean, I tell a story all the time of clients who've purchased right at the height of the bubble, and they thought, you know what, I made a bad decision, but they just stuck it out. And, you know, long story short, they own the house free and clear today, and it's worth way more than they paid for it. And I don't care what the asset is, whether it's Bitcoin, Apple stock, there are moments where you can point on it.
Yeah. So if I can interrupt that for a second. This is going to more of a rhetorical question, but so when you pay off your mortgage, and you own that home free and clear, and maybe you thought, well, my rate was too high or whatever. Right. When you're done with your rental, do you get that money back?
Right. That's the big thing. Nobody thinks about that.
Yeah.
Right?
So but you've got to go through the process of paying off that mortgage over a period of time, right? We all want it to happen real quick.
Right.
And so that really is the game plan. Just might have to change. And the other thing is I can't impress enough. There are so many opportunities out there.
Yeah.
And you just got to look at it differently. And maybe there's a creative way to do something and ask the questions.
No, and that's great. And that's what we're here for, guys. If you have questions, we'll help you get creative. But we talk about it all the time. The first step is the first step. And if you're already an owner, then maybe it's restructuring your debt. Maybe it's another opportunity, cashing out some equity and buying something. But more importantly, help the people in your lives that have the doubt, that need the advice, so that they can take that first step too. But man, I'm really having fun this week. I hope you are too. But you hear the music, you know what that means? That's my cue. We'll be back in 2. Sit tight for 2 short minutes. On the other side of this break, we're going to take more of your questions.
Are inflation and everyday expenses eating into your retirement income? Maybe you've considered a reverse mortgage and have unanswered questions like, do I still own my property? Can the bank kick me out? What happens when I die? Can I still leave my house to my kids? These are all great questions. Visit www.moreaboutreverse.com to learn more. That's www.moreaboutreverse.com. www.moreaboutreverse.com.
Here's another 5-star review.
We kept our business above water with credit cards during the pandemic. I'm glad we did. Business is better than ever. But I didn't want to be a slave to those credit card payments. I called Mark about the REC loan he advertises. Long story short, we did a REC refinance and paid off everything, even the car. Now we only have the mortgage payment. We're saving a bunch every month. Yes, we are happy to recommend Mark and the Mr. Mortgage team.
Hey, it's Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com. www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark Eitel. We are joined by Jacob Webb from Level 10. And as always, the Dominator is running the board and getting your questions on the air. 855-462-7292 is how you get that done. But hey, I'm going to throw it over to Dom so we can keep the questions rolling.
And Terry sent this one over. We are getting ready to sell our house, but we are not using an agent. What should we look for from a buyer? Can we ask for their approval?
Hey, Terry, that's a great question. Yeah, I would ask for their approval, and I wouldn't accept a pre-qualification. I'd want a bona fide approval. And if you need somebody to look over your shoulder on that approval, I would be happy to do it for you. We've talked about it a ton on this show. There are varying levels of approval, starting from pre-qualification all the way down to a fully underwritten TBD approval where you just have to plug the property in and off you go. But guys, this is a great question because I've got the man sitting right next to me who can handle the rest of the transaction, because you are going to need a title company. You may need somebody to help you draft the contract. But hey, Jacob, take a shot at that question.
Yeah, I mean, I deal with a lot of questions with for sale by owners and people that are reaching out, and they just, you basically can ask for anything that you would expect a realtor to ask for.
Right.
Like you're essentially representing yourself in that. And so I think it's really important as far as making sure that the financials for the buyer are intact and something you're comfortable with. But also, there's going to be a whole title side to this.
Right.
There's a contractual side to this.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of different things that I definitely can take a look at contracts. I read contracts all day long, and making sure that things are set up correctly and they look right. But then you've got the other side of it. You want to make sure we get the buyer's escrow money placed, right? And then are they hitting inspection timelines? And so that's why a lot of people do hire agents, because there are a lot of moving parts in a transaction. But it's definitely something that we do on a daily basis. We work directly with people, and it's just making sure that everything's happening in the time frame it needs to happen. But I would highly advise anybody trying to do that. Number one, make sure you're asking for approvals when you're comfortable, but also, I would have somebody help you review.
See that, fella? That's perfect, guys. And so check out level10title.com if you want to connect directly with Jacob. And like I said, I'm going to post all of his contact information. I'm super happy that he's been with us so far today, because that was a great question. But I'm happy to look at the approval for you. If they need to be pre-approved, we can do that as well. But, the big thing is set a reasonable price for the property. You hear me all the time advertising for free, valuereport.org. That's the system that we use as lenders to determine a value for a property. Just when we're kind of taking a quick look at it, I'll run that report for you, and then you're going to need a title partner. Somebody's going to have to hold that escrow.
I got free advice on these contracts real quick. Make sure they're dated.
Yeah, there you go.
You have no idea how many contracts I see that were like for sale by owners, and like the buyer didn't date it.
Oh, wow.
And everything starts with the date they signed.
Right.
Yeah, so simple things like that.
Well, and you brought up a great point, too. There are milestones in every contract that need to be hit, and there are severe consequences if they're not hit. It can start with a friendly handshake, and you guys can come to an agreement, and you can sign a contract, and all of a sudden, if a loan contingency isn't met, or an appraisal contingency, or an inspection period, and that time goes by, the buyer can lose their deposit.
That's right.
It can become super contentious, and then it's lawsuits, and what started as kind of an easy, innocent misunderstanding can get quite nasty.
It's not so friendly.
Yeah. So, no, that was a great question, Terry. Hey, and as always, guys, I'm going to ask you a favor. If any of this resonates, if you found it valuable, if you think Jacob and I should keep answering questions, hey, share the show with your friends, your family, your coworkers. If there's anybody out there who's got just the headline swirling around, is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time to sell? We'd love to talk to him, introduce him to the show, MrMortgageRadio.com. You can find all the back episodes. You can find my team at Mr.Mortgage. No .com there, just Mr.Mortgage. But, hey, Jacob, thanks so much for being with us this
week. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It was really a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
It's not so bad in here, is it?
It's not so bad.
Dom's over there with the bikini girls from the Hooters and ordering the pizzas for us and keeping the show running.
There you go.
Actually, there's none of that behind the scenes, folks.
It's actually freezing in here. I'm bringing a jacket next time. So.
It's cold. But hey, guys, you hear the music. You know what that means. We're at the end of another week. Thanks so much for spending some of your week with us. We will be back right here next week, same time, same station. Have a great week.
That's a wrap. Join Mark Eitel next week for more thrilling, edge-of-your-seat discussions about real estate and mortgages right here on The Mr. Mortgage Show.